Which architecture software is better, Twinmotion or Lumion, and why I made the switch? Let the debate begin in the comments below. The main difference between the software of Twinmotion and Lumion is what they run on. Twinmotion is using Unreal Engine, which is a gaming-based software used to create video games and other stuff like that. So it has really, really high quality. Lumion does not use that, but they do still have a good output of quality of images. One thing that Twinmotion has a benefit from using Unreal Engine, at least in my opinion, is there's a lot fewer settings you have to change manually. The quality is already that good that there's not a lot of things like lighting and materials that you have to change, although those things are very important and will make a big difference from just the basic settings. But in Lumion, with my experience, you have to take more time and effort into articulating the materials, the shadows, and the lighting produced, even though like the final outputs of each are incredible. I think just Lumion requires more time and more experience. Now, the learning curve of both, especially as someone that's just a beginner, if you're an architecture student, you should be smart enough to just like pick it up. I mean, you're in college, you can just like kind of play with it and mess around with everything, even if you're just starting out and you're a freshman, and just have some fun with it, because you're able to just kind of play with all these super cool settings, and even with the most basic model, you can do some pretty cool stuff. I mean, Lumion has animations, some phasing where you can show the building coming together or coming apart. I know Twinmotion has some animation features as well. They both have really high quality output features. Twinmotion does give you the ability to go up to like, I think 4K, 8K on your outputs, although I think that's more for like the higher versions and commercial use. But Lumion does have very high quality render outputs. You're able to create animation videos, walkthrough videos, panoramic views. One thing that Twinmotion does have that Lumion doesn't is there's this really cool thing called panoramic sets. And so it takes a whole compilation of all the panoramas you've taken of the building and comes together. So you can upload it to the Twinmotion cloud or send it off to people, and they can walk through your building without you having to open up anything and send it to them. So it's a really small file. Personally, I put one of my projects and turn that into a panoramic set, put it on my website for my portfolio. So when people look at it, they can just like walk through the building. It's just a beautiful rendered set. And I mean, it speaks for itself. It shows you everything in the building, and there's no need for anything else, which is cool. Twinmotion also has VR, where you can connect VR headsets to your computer. You can get inside the VR, actually change materials. It opens doors for you as you walk through. I mean, it's crazy what things are coming to. Lumion does have VR compatibility. You just can't make those changes and edits. It really gives you a different level of experience and immersion when you're able to personally yourself as like a scale, like you see everything in your everyday life, and then you get inside your building, like in that VR headset, that experience. It's crazy. You will change so much in your designs because you realize this doesn't make sense at this scale, or it just feels off. Because in your Rhino models or your Revit models, you can't necessarily get that feeling until you experience it personally. Now, let's get more into like the specs. So, operating systems and graphics cards. Now, I won't tell you which one I started with, but this was a big factor in why I did switch. I'll tell you later which one I started with and why I made the switch, but Twinmotion is a fairly light program, you would think, with how high quality it is. Maybe it takes up a lot of space. It really doesn't. And it's very powerful. It does need a very good graphics card. I think Nvidia is one of the main chips that it requires. And I know you're able to have, I think, all the way back to Windows 7 is allowed, which is crazy because we're moving on to Windows 11 now. Lumion, on the other hand, it's incredibly massive. Now, both have a lot of elements that you can add into them, like trees, vegetation, and just objects. And Lumion, all those objects are just, this is not including adding those objects. Lumion itself is big. But then once you start adding bunches of trees, it is a crazy program to run on your computer, especially if you're just having a laptop. If you're having an Apple computer, you're screwed probably. I can do another video on which computers architects should have, so if you want that, leave some comments below. But my computer was not handling Lumion, just opening it up, and then I had all these crazy setups in Lumion. It was just very slow. Lumion does require, I think, Windows 10, so it needs to be more up to date, and it's not as compatible with every computer as Twinmotion is. Now, modeling assets, I would say Lumion at the moment has a slight advantage in modeling assets. They just have more variety, better, unique, and more specific objects. Probably, I don't know about people. It's weird. People are hard in renderings because they're still not quite, they're like close to being real, but that difference that you can tell they're not real just kind of throws off the renderings. And I've even been critiqued on those. It's like, maybe you don't have like real people, and Lumion gives you the ability to have silhouette people, black and white, and also like collaged people. So that, I mean, adds another touch, because I know people have different styles. It depends on your style, but sometimes the realistic person might not be the best for conveying your ideas. And Twinmotion does have pretty good people. I think they look a little bit more normal in Twinmotion, but they just have like realistic people. They don't have those other options. One of the reasons Twinmotion has probably a better and smaller file size, or whatever you would call it, is because of their assets. The way they do it allows for you for those assets not to take up as much space. Like the trees, they're like grouped in a certain way, and they are viewed so that they're not taking up all that metadata on your computer. They also have this new introduction of a Quixel library, where they're basically like scans of objects, like real objects that are being uploaded by, like, on a cloud, kind of by a community of people. And so that's really widening the library for Twinmotion. So right now, Lumion has the advantage, but Twinmotion is growing it, and I see that direction is probably going to surpass them in the near future. I mean, Twinmotion is really just taken over after upgrading their rendering qualities. So rendering is usually the last step in your design process when you're getting close to your final critique, or getting towards the end with your client, trying to show them what your design is actually going to visually look like in 3D and more detailed. But how do you get your previous ideas into the rendering software? So, like, what's the compatibility? What's the process to go from, let's say, your sketches to the 3D modeling, then to the renderings? So obviously it'd be those three processes. So like Revit and Rhino, people use those very commonly. SketchUp, stuff like that. I mean, you can all those go into Lumion and Twinmotion. They have to be compatible, otherwise it's really hard to thrive when you can only work with one program. They're all compatible, but with Lumion and Twinmotion, it's not a live render of your model, you have to update, you have to like save it differently as like a different file, like a Twinmotion file and a Lumion file. Obviously, the file names are different than what I just mentioned, but you have to have a different file than just your Rhino and your Revit file. In Lumion, you are able to, once you have that Lumion file saved and you worked on it, you can live sync that to your Rhino model, so you don't have to keep saving the Rhino file as like a SAT file and uploading it to Lumion when you make a change. You're able to kind of have a better workflow that way. And I haven't gotten to the point in Twinmotion where I don't think that's an option yet, because that would be very helpful to have that live sync that Lumion has. But yeah, those are some of the main similarities and differences. Now, where I get to you, I did start off with Lumion. I would say a lot of people, a couple years ago when I started school, architecture school, it was between V-Ray, Lumion, and Enscape. And probably to this day, I think Enscape's falling off a little bit. At least personally, I haven't used it really. I didn't like it when I tried to use it, and I just said, enough of this. But I think it's really coming between Twinmotion and Lumion. I know I have a couple friends that just love V-Ray, and their stuff turns out great. It's just also a lot of like effort and time that goes into it, which when you're rushing to get stuff done for the final crits as an architecture student, you do not have time to spend days critiquing and doing small details just to have a percentage better render. I think it would be so much more time efficient to use the two programs I'm discussing today, Twinmotion and Lumion. Now, Enscape, the firm I worked for and interned this summer, used Enscape, but they really liked the VR aspect within Enscape, and they were able to show their clients walkthroughs of the model, and it was what they were most comfortable with, and their stuff turned out pretty sick. So I'm not dissing on Enscape. I'm just trying to kind of show where times are changing, and these are the two programs that appear to the public are kind of like coming out on top. Doesn't mean V-Ray and Enscape aren't good programs to use. You can feel free to use those, and if you want me to kind of discuss them more and how they're different, I would gladly do that in another video. But I think these two are making the best steps for the future of architecture and visualization, how the architect is able to convey their ideas to the client, to the audience. And so I see a very bright future there. Although I think Lumion, I just couldn't use it well on my computer. That was a deal breaker for me. And then like I was live or die with Lumion. I was like, this is the best thing ever. Especially once I discovered their animation phasing, and I could just do a whole bunch of stuff. And then I also did a lot of video walkthroughs for my architecture presentations. I probably went a little overboard. I think last year I had like 3 or 4 videos for one project. I mean, they were really cool, but it might have been too much. And then this summer, one of my coworkers kind of like talked to me about Twinmotion, and then I saw some YouTube videos about it, and it was like, I'll try this. I'll try it, because the good thing about both of these softwares is as a student, you can get them for free. Now, Lumion used to be easier to get as a student. You didn't really have to show much to identify your student. Now, it's a little bit harder process, but you should still be able to get in and get free access as a student in Lumion. But Twinmotion, it's basically free if you're not using it for commercial use. So free for anyone, students, etc., for forever, as long as it's not for commercial use. And now that's really good news that this stuff is available for free, because they can get to be very expensive. And as I talked before, Twinmotion was just much easier to use, and so that's why I did make the switch from Lumion to Twinmotion. I don't know, I just thought Lumion was everything. And then I discovered Twinmotion, and I find just a whole new level. It's like a whole new tier, in my opinion. It's crazy, and I love it so far. So I'm continuing to work on it. I'll show you some of my work and develop on it. And if you want to see more content, just like debating which software programs are better, I made a video up here talking about the difference between SketchUp and Rhino and comparing those two, which ones, what they're better at. So check that video out. And if you want me to compare any other softwares, just leave that comment below, and I'll make that video as soon as possible. Thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy the content.